Good afternoon from Barcelona, Spain, where IAFOR is holding our annual conference on education, arts, media and culture. I'm standing here next to two keynote presenters. Can you briefly introduce yourselves and what it is that you do?
Okay, so I'm Baden Offord. I'm from Curtin University, from the Centre for Human Rights Education. And my research, which is in Australia, and my research area is in human rights and cultural studies.
My name is Yirga Gelaw Woldeyes, originally from Ethiopia. I work and studied and work in Australia at Curtin University. Baden was my mentor and we worked together. I teach and research in critical human rights education, and I'm pleased to be here.
Professor Offord, you are also a member of the International Academic Board.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about how your relationship with IAFOR has developed?
I think it was the very first IAFOR Cultural Studies Conference being held, and I was invited to be a keynote, but unfortunately, because of the earthquake, I had to decline. But my relationship with IAFOR started the year later, coming to Osaka and then Kobe and Tokyo, and it's been a very worthwhile and valuable relationship since that time. I've seen it grow and I've seen it expand, and I think the most interesting thing about it is that it's very much about fostering an exchange of culture, knowledge, experience from so many different perspectives, which is what you need if you're going to try and find some kind of truth about the world.
And you were able to bring a new member into the IAFOR community.
Well, yes, although he has presented in IAFOR before, online, I think, and
In person, Kobe.
and in person in Kobe. So he's also got a long relationship with IAFOR, and I'm thrilled he's come to Barcelona as well.
That's nice to see how the IAFOR community is expanding through the networks through the people we are meeting at the conferences. And
I think also too because we share a very sort of strong intellectual curiosity and concern about very similar things, about how knowledge is made, how to end conflict, how to really educate, and to consider all the complexities around that. Particularly because I come from Aotearoa, New Zealand, originally. Yirga comes from Ethiopia, but we live in Australia. So we have an interesting relationship, a very important relationship as well, that we are forming in relation to Indigenous issues in Australia. So we share that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. After I think I joined the centre as a teacher and also Baden came, there were questions that we were commonly interested in, and these questions, fortunately for us, like myself who was a beginner, Baden and others were thinking about this many years before, like your idea of, for instance, reimagining human rights, activating human rights so that people should not just be detached and try to implement rights as they are, but rather be activated and engage. And that type of really motivation as a director at the center that Baden brought, and also the kind of collegiality and friendship that developed there, really helped us to develop ways of teaching human rights, cultural studies, and managed to produce books and journal articles. The most recent one is Pedagogy of Human Rights, which came out from Routledge, and also Decolonizing Human Rights. Because if human rights are not relevant to how we live and what we want to change in the world, that means they are somehow means of numbing us or participate in the colonial destruction of the planet. And we need to activate them, we need to decolonize them. And a lot of that is because of the existence of people like Baden before us. I think that it's not like to. I know Baden doesn't want some people to talk about him, But I think if we want really to move forward, we have to appreciate even if the little things that people who are ahead of us do to encourage those who are beginners, that has a life-changing impact, and which I'm grateful for having to work with Baden and others at the same time, and also find my own voice and my own confidence to speak about the things that matter and do what I do.
So you spoke a little bit about this in your keynote presentation, and you will be speaking about decolonizing education and methods and the conscience of people. So this is a question, I guess, to both of you. And you talked in your presentation about pacifism being active and not passive. So how do we disagree well? How can we all come together and talk about very sensitive issues without stepping on each other's toes?
Well, that's the biggest question of all, isn't it? How to lean in and listen to others, to actually see that we become sensitized to what it might be to be a human being through listening to others' stories. Your story is different to my story. I think it's about a cultural shift and a radical cultural change, as Yirga's talking about, which is that we need to develop places, societies that value stories, individual stories, collective stories, but to be able to provide the kind of environment that everybody would be happy to sit down and share their story. So somehow we have to break the cycles of hate and of conflict, of the terrible things that we do as human beings. We can't shy away from that. But I think my answer to this is to lean in. And that's why I think the term pacifist has to be completely reimagined as a very activated source of energy towards that kind of goal, which is radical education, actually, which I think would transform the world if we did that. But you're right. These are difficult questions to work out thoroughly.
I think the way we think about difference is very important. Often we assume that a difference is threatening, that there has to be one truth, that everyone must agree on the basis of that truth. And that assumption in itself has enormous impacts on our ability to change, to adapt, and to be different. To be different is very important. We have to be different in order to create, in order to move forward. So the very assumptions that we have about difference has to change. When people disagree, they are expressing something important within them, a kind of truth that is not recognized, that is not understood by the other. So I think every difference, as Baden would say, is an invitation. It creates a kind of encounter. And instead of becoming angry for having a difference, we become curious. What is that strong thing that is taking this person? What that is moving this person? And that type of curiosity, when it is based on empathy, when it is based on the will also to change if there is something worthy of changing, would bring us even to a more fruitful dialogue where we can arrive at better ideals, better truths, and so on. And for me, differences are very essential ingredients of who we are as human beings, and we should cultivate them. It's only when we are unable to listen to each other that differences may lead into conflict and disaster.
And we can achieve that through education, you say. And what will you teach? How would a module look like in terms of sensitizing students and the younger generation?
Well, after you.
Okay. I think just to share what I do in class, I always encourage students to think about how they think, because we have the capacity, the ability, naturally, to think through others' perspectives. Like I can think thinking, how would that tree think about me? How would that person can think about me? That tree may not have any thought, but I can insert certain ideas in the other and can think about myself. So what we do in class is to show students the existence of different standpoints from where people can think, right? And then also to encourage them to choose a standpoint based on certain values. For instance, we teach human rights. It means we are interested in people who are suffering, people who are facing human rights violations. So we cannot be neutral, we cannot be objective. We want to be part of those people who are suffering. So we want to think from their point of view. So education is a way of moving towards those whose voices have been silenced, who are unable to exist and continue to thrive. And when we try to cultivate that type of standing in the position of the other, trying to understand how others want to be understood, right? And that type of empathic teaching often encourages the students to find a voice within them, and also the ability to listen others, not based on the books and the scripts that they bring, but based on their own encounter with others. And that type of relationship that they develop then starts to guide them, and they start to develop new ideas rather than repeating what the text tells them. So that is how, at least, we try to do some of the things we teach. Yeah?
The environment that we teach in has to be one in which we somehow develop protocols for honouring difference. So we need to alert in the pedagogical kind of experience that each of us comes with a different worldview, a different life experience, and so on, and that we need to actually, as you said very well, also refer not just to the books and what others say, etc., but to also ground truth it on your own experience, to see what might be absent, to see what might be common, across. But I think teaching students about complexity is in itself the opening up. It's like a flower in that relationship, so that the whole class has to be built on this understanding of we are all, in a sense, at the table. We're all at the table together. So we honour each other's voice. And then we sort of develop that sort of respect and that kind of trust as we go through the various topics and the various things, which can often be very, very confronting, and it takes risk. It takes a sense of courage to also lean in, I think. Not everyone has that, so you have to develop in class ways of bringing out such agency, I suppose, in students. So it's an ongoing formation of relationship in a class, and you isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like building a family for the period of time that you're with those people. Yeah.
Do you think, in the current context that we're living in regards to technological advancements, do you think that young people experience less, communicate less with each other, have less opportunities to learn from their environment because they're always stuck on a screen?
I'm not an expert entirely on that particular aspect of learning or what's happening with younger people, but I do know, for example, that less younger people, I think there was a study out just last week in Britain that younger people are not reading as much in terms of literature and so on. There's been a lot of research done about attention span being shorter and all that sort of thing. I think all that is part and parcel. And so I think the technological disruption happening is having a fundamental impact on the way that we think and how we might imagine the future and so on. But at the same time, I'm also kind of thinking too that, technologies have always been a disruptive thing for us as human beings. There's different ways of communicating that develop over time. So I'm not sure where it's all headed. I'm not sure I can say that, you know, there's a greater dysfunctionality amongst younger people because there's, you know, less quality communication. I'm not sure yet, but I would say that there's an awful lot of noise around technology through communication technologies that are having an impact psychologically, socially, culturally, politically, economically, on every aspect of our lives, young or old. So I'm just not sure how to map that yet myself. I think that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah, I think these are things that require us to consider learning as an opening to the future, learning as a way of engaging on issues that are challenging, but based on the belief that we can overcome them. I think one of the problems with technology, with all other challenges that we face, is this assumption that things have gone out of our hands, that all we can do is to renounce our energy, to abandon what we could have done using the same technology or other alternatives to counter and also to recreate our own futures. And for me, this technological and all these things, the impact that they have is their ability to colonize the future. That we somehow assume that the future is already being made, being decided by certain things that are out there, and we don't have the capacity to change it. It is this very thinking that works in subordinating us to the disasters that might be unfolding. So that is why instead of really looking at the future as closed, as done by some technological, ecological, whatever disaster, we have to imagine the future as open. And for me, the future is an imagined present. We don't act in the future. We act in the present, but we think we are acting in the future. So taking the future as an active present in education, engaging with one another, and I think there's a whole lot of things that we can do as human beings if we can kind of listen to each other and work together.
You mentioned the word that is going to bring me to the last question. What is your outlook on the future of people being able to express themselves without using hatred or violence? And would your students right now in the classroom be able to graduate and be able to discuss things and critically evaluate and accept others the way they are?
I think some of those students would definitely be prepared to be robust in their relationship with the world in the future and seeing it that way. But I also think that a lot of our students, like myself, maybe Yirga, will always be shocked by what might be happening in the future, that there's no kind of ideal circumstance that I can see. I think we need to always prepare students to be resilient, to be thoughtful, to be caring, to be empathetic, to be critical, as Yirga said, but also to not lose their own inner compass, as it were, to always call things to account, no matter how difficult they are. I think some of our students do that. I think it's a very difficult transition, though, from learning about these things and then, having them enacted in the world. But I think, going back to Yirga's point before, that what we do create in the classroom is the space to think that there are potentialities, there's possibilities that can emerge if your approach to knowledge is basically opened, it's flexible, it's sensitive, it's not happening from a standpoint of assumption. There's no full stop, That's the problem. We always want a full stop, and there's no possibility of that, actually. So as we see the human being emerge, possibly, in the next 100 years, 200 years, possibly, I think that we'll see all sorts of futures emerge. But that the ground that we prepare now in these conversations, in these kinds of places like IAFOR, there's enormous, I don't know how to say hope, but there's an enormous sense of energy in that we can, and the minute you bring together a certain number of people with the same energy, same passion, and the same concerns, and who are, in this sense, eager and interested to look into other people's windows, yeah? I think you've got magic. And I don't know what will come from that, because writers write about it, Miyazaki makes films about it, and so on. Do you know what I mean? So it's a magical thing in that way. But, you know, I'm on the other hand, I'm quite sober about the fact that the world, as it is in a precarious and perilous situation. And I am shocked by it. I just met someone from the conference who's come from Beirut. I think that it reminds us how, you know, there is no such thing as this kind of distance ultimately when you meet face to face and you see someone coming from a place which is being bombarded at the moment as part of war. You know, you really do feel that connection. Yeah. So.
Okay then. Thank you so much for the encouraging words as well.
Is that all right?